Hello family, this is Deborah with Black Education TV. Right now I'm going to focus on the basil plant you see there as I do this video. Of course my video will not be about basil, but I'm going to focus there. As you see, the garden is pretty cleared out in a lot of areas. A lot of the beds are cleared out because we are getting ready for fall planting. I actually could have already started, but I have decided to wait a bit before we start our fall planting. Okay, probably, Yah willing, next week I will get started. As a matter of fact, we actually did get started. I like to plant certain things inside of those peat moss pots that we started off in earlier in the season. And so we actually have started, we just haven't started putting things in the ground. So let me bring that little bit of clarification. I had to bring that clarification. But anyway, I'm going to focus on the basil plant there as I do this video. Now, some of you all saw the video I did the other day where I was talking about those who are able to let go of our comforts, the things that we've gotten so used to, like the comfortable air conditioning and the running water and heat sources and, you know, all the things that we are so used to, internet and television, cell phones, you know, the stuff that many of us probably couldn't even live without at this point. If you were to send us through a time capsule back into the prairie days, most of us would just shrivel up and die, literally, not knowing what to do and how to survive. Anyway, there was a comment that was left on that particular video that just kind of grabbed my attention, because I remember that time, I believe it was 2005, during the time that this happened, in which the comment was in relation to Hurricane Katrina. During the time that this happened, we lived in Michigan, and I remember looking at how desperate everyone was and how rough everything had become. And just thinking to myself, man, what would I do in that situation? And I also remember thinking to myself that I wish that our people were better equipped mentally to be able to handle some of these things. Because way back then in 2005, we were not. And guess what? We still are not. Regardless to whether you are rich or poor, middle class, whatever it is, most of our people are not prepared to survive. I'm going to say the poor are probably more prepared, and some of you may not understand that statement. And I think this young lady's comment will help you to understand what I mean by that. Because when you are rich and privileged, you think that there's always going to be a way made for you because you are rich. Well, newsflash, back in the day, in 1933, during the Great Depression, there were rich people standing in soup kitchen lines too, because they were too rich to think ahead and say, well, maybe I need to learn how to grow my own food, you see. And many of them had everything done for them. And the big supermarket chains that you see now were not as abundant. Not saying that grocery stores didn't exist at that time, but they were not on every corner. So I'm going to go ahead and read this young lady's statement, and I want to know how many of you are prepared for the scenario that she was thrust into at age 9. Okay. Her name is Alexandra, and she says, I've experienced extreme discomfort being an inhabitant in New Orleans during the fiasco that transcribed after Hurricane Katrina. I was 9 years old. The only home I'd ever known was washed away in an instant. Along with that, me and my family were forced to remain in the city when we tried to leave on foot because we were so desperate. We were forced to walk through water with floating dead bodies and sewage and filth. We lived off of canned vegetables and no water. We were in buildings with no electricity and no running water, with grown people fighting and shooting guns around children, around babies. My mother and brothers and I remained in this condition for days until we were herded like cattle onto a bus with an unknown destination. My brothers and I were separated from my mother at one point in time. Eventually, we were fortunate enough to be returned to her. I'm 22 now, and I still have nightmares like I'm that 9-year-old little girl. I've grown to appreciate that experience. And when I think back, I can see where Yah had to have his arms around me and my family, because there were so many that were killed or forgotten. The only way we came out of that hell alive was because of him. Talking about the Most High. Okay. Now, when I read her comment, it kind of took my mind back to that time. The struggle was very real, family. And notice this young lady who was 9 years old at the time, now 22, says that she appreciates that time, because what that has done, it has prepared her mind and her heart for things that many of us are not prepared for. Now, I too, as a young child, was able to experience what poverty and lack was like. I remember coming up where my mom struggled. There were times where we didn't have lights. Sometimes we didn't have running water. Sometimes we didn't have heat. You see? So I've lived those experiences. Many of you have experienced that as well. And so it's not foreign to you. But what's unfortunate is we have become so used to having modern conveniences that we're not going to be prepared for the times of turmoil that are going to be presented to the United States of America. We're so used to struggle, chaos, and mayhem belonging to someone else in some other nation somewhere abroad across the water that we cannot fathom that this can become our reality someday. So while we're playing games, messing around, wasting time, the clock is ticking. And you can find yourself in a very similar situation as this young woman, Alexandra, who was forced into that at a very young age when she was faced with circumstances beyond her control. She was only 9 years old. That's why the scripture says, like a snare, destruction is going to come upon the whole earth. And so that means there's going to be situations beyond your control that you will be presented with. How you handle the situation or these situations will be determined by what you do now. If you're going to spend your time wasting time, playing games, going to and fro, stirring up conflict here and there, eating, drinking, and being merry, and not considering what tomorrow shall bring, then you will find yourself in a situation where you feel just as helpless as this young lady felt. And although Yah brought her out, we don't know what the end time results are going to be for those who are forced or thrust into great tribulation, because the earth has turned, the tide has turned to where everyone, the rich and the poor, the small and the great, are thrust into great tribulation. There was a sister who shared a scripture with our group, and the scripture talked about how in ancient times our people were trying to savor a drop of water, literally fighting over, not really fighting over crumbs, but trying to spare and save crumbs, cherishing a crumb because food was so scarce. When I look at the activities of so many people, not just our people, but people in general, when I look at our activities as people of this world, Most of us are literally living in la la land, not considering what tomorrow shall bring, not considering that the time is at hand. And so when I think about this young woman bringing forth her testimony in response to this video that I did concerning letting go of modern conveniences, there's going to come a day and time where you won't have a choice. The choice is going to be snatched away from you. Your only choice will be to try to survive. Learning survival skills is a must right now. And I must say, I am guilty of this, as are so many of us. But the cares of this life have literally slowed many of us down. Trying to put out a fire over here, dealing with that over there, dealing with this over here. You see, that is what the enemy does. He sends in, he stirs up conflict so that your mind is so preoccupied that you don't know what the heck is coming your way, and thus you do not prepare for what is coming your way. You are too preoccupied with nonsense that you are not preparing for what is real. So many of us have this evil eye that we have towards one another. Jealousy, envy, bitterness, and strife takes hold of your heart and your mind to the point where you don't realize you are damaging your own self, hurting your own family, doing all these things. Can't even muster up love in your heart for your brother and sister. You can't even do it. And it's so obvious because we are so against one another. While other nations don't particularly need to unify, I'm going to say specifically, I'm going to just say Europeans. Many of them don't even need to unify because individual family units with them are doing what it takes to secure their family. When you look at doomsday preppers and stuff like that, you don't see like a whole lot of groups of people where it's 10, 20, 30 people coming together on land trying to do something to unify, to protect each other. You see, in many cases, individual families who have the resources to bunker down, you see, store up food, do all kinds of things to protect their family unit, husband, wife, children, and sometimes in-laws. You see, but we as a people, we need unification because we don't have the resources that some of these other nations have. But the one thing that we need, we lack because we can't stand each other. We're so busy trying to unravel each other and trying to hurt one another that we're actually hurting our own selves and don't even realize it. The enemy has done a number on us and it has worked profusely. And so while everyone else in the world, those who can afford it, of course, while everyone else is preparing and bunkering down, of course, we already know what the scripture says about that too, that the Most High, wherever you are, he gonna come and get you. If you gonna be God, he gonna get you regardless of what your resources are. But the point of the matter is they have the resources to do it. So while they are making progress, we are making excuses because we refuse to unify on a spiritual level. We're supposed to be in unification with the Most High Yah at the helm leading everything. But when you are trying to lead it yourself, you're going to lead yourself right off a cliff. That's what's going to happen. And so, family, even if you can't unify with a large group, if you have those that are in your own family that you can unify with, it is time to awaken out of this sleep, family. There was just a warning issued by the NAACP that black people enter into Missouri at their own risk. What is this telling you, family? Does that mean we need to keep playing games, wasting time? No, that means we need to get ourselves together. Reel your mind in, family. Reel it in. All of these games, get away from people that's playing games. The scripture says, have no fellowship with the unfruitful works of darkness. If you are around somebody who's performing works of darkness, get the heck away from them. Because we got work to do, family. Shalom.